Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel for a brand new mystery with Molly. If you are new around here, if you have never seen my face on your screen before, then hi, my name is Molly and I post true crime videos like this every single week. So if you think that that is something that you might want to stick around for, then please do subscribe and don't forget to switch on the little notification bell so that YouTube will let you know whenever I post a new video. This week we are going to be discussing the unsolved case of Janice LaPlant. She was a 49-year-old woman from Alabama in the US, and she just suddenly disappeared one day in the summer of 2011. I worked closely with Janice's daughter Tracy on this video, and Tracy has been working tirelessly over the years to try and find her mum. She's doing everything she possibly can to find out what happened to her on the day that she vanished. Tracy is honestly one of the strongest women I've ever come to know in my life. Despite everything she has gone through, she is so fierce and determined and a true inspiration, and I feel so blessed to be able to say that she has also become such a good friend of mine. Tracy has built a big following on social media, specifically on TikTok, and she uses her platform to spread awareness of her mum's case. She's created a GoFundMe page to help fund the search for her mum, the link to which will be in the description box if you would like to donate. If you aren't in a position to be able to donate anything right now, then it would be amazing if you could just watch and sit through the ads on this video if any pop up, because I will be donating all of the ad revenue made from this video directly to the GoFundMe. It's completely free to sit through the ads and just takes a little bit of your time, but it could make a huge difference in how much money we raise together for the GoFundMe. Just before we get into the case, I would like to mention that we are going to be discussing some very heavy themes in this video. Themes such as child abuse and neglect, mental health issues and substance abuse, so viewer discretion is advised. And I know that I don't really have to ask this of you guys because the majority of you are always so respectful in the comments anyway, but if I could just remind you that Tracy, I imagine, will probably read the comments that you write, so please be kind and considerate. Tracy and Janice's stories are very hard ones to hear. They both went through a hell of a lot in their lives, so please try to be understanding and compassionate when leaving any messages. So for this week's case, we are going back, coming up to 12 years ago now, in mid-2011 in the city of Lincoln in Alabama. But before we get into the events of the day that Janice disappeared, let me tell you a little bit more about Janice and about her and Tracy's life leading up to this case taking place. So Janice Ruth LaPlant, who often went by the name Becky, was born on the 13th of July 1962. She grew up on the West Coast, and not much is really known about Janice's childhood. Even her daughter Tracy doesn't know much about her mum's background. We know that Janice and her siblings were put into the care system as children after their mother and father separated. They were in foster care in Washington State where their mum lived. However, later Janice ran away from Washington State and she went to live in Alabama instead, which is where her dad was residing. And we also know that at some point, unfortunately, Janice developed an addiction to drugs. Again, it's not known exactly when this started, when she began taking drugs, but after she started using them, they were pretty much a constant throughout the rest of her life. She really struggled with substance abuse. It consumed her life. And so when Tracy and her twin sister were born in 1987, they were fraternal twins, they were actually born addicted to certain drugs as newborn babies as a result of Janice's struggles with drug abuse. So Tracy and her sister had to be kept in the hospital for a while, constantly being monitored by doctors. And due to these circumstances, obviously CPS, Child Protective Services, were brought in, and Janice started going through rehab so that she could keep her baby girls. But even after going through rehab, still Janice struggled with her drug addictions. I don't believe she was ever able to get fully sober. So Tracy and her sister did have a very difficult and at times dangerous childhood because of this. Often Janice would leave the girls alone for periods of time when they were very little. She she would take them with her when she went to buy drugs. On many occasions, she would be driving around in the car all night looking for drugs, and the girls would just be in the back seat. And because the girls would be up all night those nights, often they wouldn't go into school. They missed a lot of school. And when they were at school, they would fall asleep often because they were so tired from being awake throughout the night. Tracy recalls having to steal from grocery stores as a child. She would have to steal food and clothes and shoes because the family didn't have much money, and much of the money that Janice did have would go on drugs. But Tracy says that it wasn't always bad. As unstable and traumatic as their childhood was, she does have some good memories. She does remember some happy times with her mum. She recalls them often going camping out by a river, and Tracy remembers those times as actually being a lot of fun. Janice would teach the girls how to swim and how to fish. She showed them how to actually catch the fish and then clean and cook them afterwards to eat. She remembers going on long hikes and searching for caves. She remembers her mum showing her what kind of berries were safe and not safe to eat. Janice was very intelligent with that kind of stuff. Tracy recalls how her mum used to be very, very good with animals. She said, quote, "She had a beautiful gift with animals. It seemed like any animal would come up to her and let her pet them. To me, that just shows what a beautiful soul she really did have." Tracy also remembers learning karate and martial arts with her mum, and apparently Janice was just naturally very good at that, very good at martial arts. So good, in fact, that at one point she was a martial arts instructor and she would take part in these martial arts competitions, and they seemed to be some of the best times for the family because karate and martial arts was something else for Janice to put her energy into and focus on rather than substances. Tracy also remembers times when her mum would make her laugh. She described Janice as being a very funny person. She had a good sense of humour, and she was also someone that just wanted to make other people happy. She cared more about the happiness of others than her own happiness, which is obviously a lovely quality to have, but often that meant that she would kind of neglect herself. She would neglect her own mental health. Janice did really struggle with different mental health issues, which I can imagine is why she did turn to drugs so often. It was a way for her to try and cope with the mental pain that she was in, which as Tracy has gotten older, she says that she has a much better understanding of that now. Understandably, when she was a young child, she would get upset and angry at her mum because of the fact that she used drugs and she neglected her and her sister. But now, being an adult herself, she understands that her mum used drugs to try and numb the mental pain that she was in a lot of the time. She used drugs to try and cope with the monsters that were living in her head. Her mum wasn't a bad person, but the power that drugs had over her meant that she was unable to be the best parent she could have been. She was unable to look after her kids properly. As I mentioned before, Child Protective Services were pretty much constantly involved in the family's lives. They were always called to check on the kids. I think Tracy and her sister's teachers called them a couple of times as they noticed signs of neglect and child abuse from the girls when they were at school. And so when the sisters were just 11 years old, CPS took them away from their mum and they were placed in foster care. Tracy and her sister remained in the foster care system for a few years until the age of 14, when they moved to Southeast Alabama after being adopted by a family. Tracy was unable to have any form of contact with her mum after this, and despite being taken away from their unsafe home environment with their mum, the new home, the new environment that they were adopted into also wasn't pleasant for them. Tracy and her sister were subjected to abuse at the hands of their adoptive family. As I understand it, they weren't violent towards the girls. It wasn't physical abuse. It was more emotional and mental and verbal abuse. They would get shouted at and criticized a lot by their adoptive parents. They would have a go at the girls if they felt that they weren't working hard enough in school. They would make them feel bad about their appearance, even telling Tracy that she was overweight at one point when she wasn't. If anything, she was the opposite. She was underweight. Their adoptive parents burnt a load of their mum Janice's belongings without the girls' permission. Things like Janice's old old art books and pictures and stuff like that, which is just horrendous. Those items were basically the only thing the girls had left of their mum. As I said, they couldn't have any form of contact with her, so all they had of her was some of her old belongings, and their adoptive parents just took that away from them and burnt it to nothing. Tracy lived with her adoptive parents for a number of years until the age of 19, when she was essentially kicked out because the parents didn't like the boy that she was dating. So they told her that she had until her 19th birthday to find somewhere else to live, even though she didn't have much money at all. But nevertheless, she did as they asked. She moved out and she started living with her boyfriend and his grandmother. Tracy and her boyfriend eventually got married and they moved away from Alabama to Texas together, and her now husband joined the armed forces. At age 21, Tracy had her first baby, a baby daughter. However, unfortunately, by this point in time, her marriage had started to break down. And it was also around this same time when Tracy's twin sister told her that she had started speaking to their mum, Janice, again after all these years. Her sister had gotten back in touch with their mum via their older brother, and she decided to rebuild that relationship with her mum, and she asked Tracy if she wanted to do the same. However, initially Tracy said no. She felt that the relationship between her and her mum ended years ago when they were put in foster care, and I can imagine that her mum might have felt like a bit of a stranger to her by this point because she hadn't seen her in so long. So initially Tracy said no, but then gradually over time they did start speaking to each other once again. They spoke on the phone a lot. Tracy told her mum about the troubles that she was having in her marriage, and she said that she and her husband were going to separate and divorce. And so Janice actually said to Tracy, why don't you come back to Alabama and you and your baby girl can come and stay with me? It was kind of like an olive branch for Janice. She wanted this second chance with her daughter to make up for lost time and say sorry for everything that she had put her through as a child. And so Tracy accepted this offer and she went back to Alabama. Janice met her granddaughter for the first time, whom she absolutely adored. Tracy said that Janice was so amazing with her daughter. However, they didn't stay with Janice for very long because Tracy just felt quite unsafe there. Her mum lived in an apartment complex called Lincoln Manor Apartments in Alabama, and it was in an area that felt quite dangerous. There was a lot of criminal activity going on there, and neighbours of Janice's had warned Tracy while she was there that her mum was still doing drugs and still living a dangerous lifestyle, and so Tracy knew that it was not a safe environment for her or her daughter to live in. And so after just 3 days they went back to Texas, and she and her ex-husband decided to give things another go and get back together. Little did Tracy know that when she left, that would be the last time she would see her mum, because just 2 weeks after this she received a call informing her that her mum had gone missing. The date that Janice LaPlant disappeared was the 25th of July 2011, and that evening Janice was at her apartment with some friends and acquaintances, and they were having a bit of a party. They were drinking alcohol and having a cookout and just having a good time, until eventually around late afternoon / early evening time, Janice and her former brother-in-law, her sister's ex-partner Alan, decided to head to the local gas station to buy some more beer as they had run out. So they went to the gas station together. Tracy believes that the gas station was called the Mapco Mart. I'll put a picture of it on screen. They went to this gas station, but Janice never returned. Alan did, but Janice didn't. Alan told the other party guests when he arrived back at the apartment that whilst they were at the store, Janice ran into someone that she knew, and so she decided to stay behind and chat to them whilst Alan made his way back. But Janice never returned, and she was not seen again after this, and to this day has not been seen since. No one has any idea what happened to her after Alan left her at the gas station that evening. Now, it seems as though initially when Janice didn't come back, none of her friends or the party guests really thought much of it, and no one took any action for a while. I don't think Janice was always the most reliable person, so it seems as though no one was really too worried when she didn't return. They just assumed that eventually she would come back, but she didn't. And it wasn't until 2 weeks later, when Janice's daughter Tracy was informed of her mum's disappearance, Janice's boyfriend Eugene rang Tracy and he asked her if she had heard from her mum recently, because it had been 2 weeks now and he hadn't seen her. And of course Tracy hadn't. She had no idea where her mum was, and she told Eugene to get in touch with the police and report her as missing, which he finally did on the 10th of August 2011, 17 days after she vanished. So you may be thinking right about now that Eugene sounds very suspicious because of the fact that he waited so long to report his girlfriend as missing, and he only did it because Tracy literally told him to. So very strange behaviour, which makes alarm bells ring a little bit. But despite this, it appears as though he wasn't really considered a person of interest by the police. I think it was determined that he was at the apartment the whole time that Janice went to the gas station, so he seemed to have an alibi. And also he was actually a very elderly and frail man. I believe he was basically Janice's sugar daddy, even though he actually didn't have much money, and he was disabled and in a wheelchair, so it's unlikely that he would have been able to really do anything to Janice anyway, hurt her in any way and overpower her. Soon after Eugene reported Janice as missing, Tracy called the Lincoln Police Department herself to ask what was going on with the case. Did they have any leads on her mum yet? However, the police basically just brushed her off. It seemed as though they weren't really bothering to do anything. They weren't bothering to actually try and find Janice. And tragically, it's believed that the reason for this, and the reason why Janice's disappearance would ultimately never really get any attention from the media and the public, was because of her lifestyle. Because Janice had mental health issues and because she was a drug addict, it was like no one was really interested in her case. Like, people felt that she didn't deserve to be found, which is awful. So Tracy had no choice but to start trying to investigate her mum's case herself. She started asking around, asking family members and friends and associates in Lincoln if they had any idea what might have happened to her mum. And it was during this process when a man named Leroy came to her attention, a man that she believed may have had involvement in her mum's disappearance. Leroy was an acquaintance of Janice's. He was into drugs and he would supply drugs to her sometimes. He was known as being a very violent man. He would apparently brag about how violent he'd been to people in the past. He would brag about how his dad was reportedly a leader of the KKK. He was racist and sexist. He spoke about women in a disgusting manner. He was someone that made jokes about sexual assault. He was just not a good person at all, a very shifty character. And because he knew Janice, Tracy and other people in Janice's life started to think that maybe he could have been responsible for Janice's disappearance. A theory that Tracy has is that perhaps on the evening that her mum disappeared, she met with Leroy to buy some drugs from him. Maybe he was the person that she ran into at the gas station while she was buying beer. Maybe she got into his car, they took drugs together, and she suffered an overdose and died. And maybe Leroy, instead of calling for help and calling 911, decided to hide Janice's body somewhere because he was scared, as he supplied the drugs that killed her. Or maybe Janice didn't die of an overdose. Maybe Leroy just murdered her for some reason and then disposed of her body. But if that was the case, then the place where he disposed of her is still unknown. But there is one theory surrounding the location of her remains, and that's that perhaps Leroy put Janice's body in this pond on his property. Apparently, he dug this pond on his land around the time that Janice vanished, before Janice vanished. And he told people that he did it because he was going to use it as like a pit, this big pit to burn trash in his backyard. However, it seems as though he changed his mind about that because he soon filled it in with concrete not long after after Janice went missing. And so when Tracy heard about this, she just had this gut-wrenching feeling that maybe that's where her mum is. Maybe Leroy put Janice's body in this pond and then he covered it up with concrete, or perhaps she is buried somewhere else on his land. Of course, this is a theory that has never been proven, but I guess it also hasn't been disproven either. Tracy says that the police investigating her mum's case did briefly look into Leroy. Well, they asked him to come in for an interview and they made an appointment with him. However, he never turned up. And it doesn't really seem as though the police chased this. They didn't keep hounding him to come in to be questioned. They just left it. Like, oh, he didn't turn up. Okay, never mind, we'll just leave him be then. They never searched the pond on his property or any of his property for Janice or any potential evidence. As I understand it, they've never been able to secure a search warrant to be able to do this. But it appears as though that was the extent of the investigation into Leroy. I don't know if he is still considered a person of interest today. I hope he is, because he definitely wasn't looked into enough in the beginning, in my opinion. Now, some of you may be wondering whether or not Alan, Janice's former brother-in-law and the man that she went to the gas station with that evening, could have been responsible for Janice's disappearance. I mean, if they even made it to the gas station, if Alan was involved, then perhaps they didn't even get to the gas station. Maybe Alan did something to Janice before they got there. So was he ever considered a person of interest? Well, he actually passed away just days after Janice went missing. He reportedly died of natural causes, and because he died so soon after, the police were never able to speak to him or take a statement from him, which is so unfortunate because he never provided a description of the person Janice supposedly ran into at the gas station. I don't think it's even known whether it was a man or a woman that she ran into. And as far as Tracy is aware, Alan himself has never been looked into as a suspect by the police, which again seems bizarre considering he did seem to be the last person to see Janice on the day that she vanished. As with any missing persons case, there is the theory that perhaps Janice just decided to leave. Maybe she decided to run away and start a new life elsewhere. Maybe she left of her own accord, but this is a theory that is not believed by most. Firstly, it's very unlikely that she would not tell anyone in her life that that was her intention. And secondly, there has been no activity on her social security number since her disappearance, and also she never cashed her disability checks, which Janice received due to the fact that by the time she went missing, she was considered legally blind. She had a lot of trouble with her eyesight, but she didn't collect these disability checks around the time of her disappearance, so she wouldn't have had much, if any, money to actually go and start fresh somewhere else. Tragically, Tracy herself does believe that her mum is probably deceased and that foul play was somehow involved in her death, whether it be that she overdosed and someone hid her body or something even more sinister happened. But so far, no one has ever been definitively linked to Janice's disappearance, and this case remains unsolved to this day. But it's not for a lack of trying. As I said, Tracy is still working incredibly hard to try and find answers, and she has been doing that pretty much since she found out that her mum went missing. She has never given up the search for Janice. Like I mentioned earlier, unfortunately and very disappointingly, Tracy struggled to get the local media interested in her mum's case, and over time she would reach out to the police department and ask for any updates, and they would never really have any. On one occasion, she asked them if they had checked the CCTV footage from the gas station where Janice was last seen, and they said that they had. They said that they went to the gas station to collect the footage. However, by the time they did, the footage from the day that Janice disappeared had been erased. It was one of those cameras that records on like a loop. It records for a certain amount of time, like 30 days, for example, and then after that, the footage from the last month would be automatically deleted and it would start recording again. And I don't believe there is any way to get that old footage back. And by the time the police went to look at it, the footage from that day was gone, which is so frustrating. It appears as though the police just did not act fast enough with that. As I said, over the years, Tracy would contact the police department numerous times, and every single time there seemed to be absolutely no movement with the case. I mean, a lot of the time when Tracy would ring the police asking for updates, they wouldn't pick up the phone or even call her back. Tracy's pleas for help were just ignored for years, and so in recent years, Tracy decided to turn to social media to spread awareness and bring more attention to her mum's disappearance. Specifically, Tracy turned to TikTok. Initially, she started posting just normal videos on TikTok, and then eventually she decided to start sharing the story of her mum's case on there after seeing creators such as Sarah Turney using the platform to spread awareness on her sister Alyssa's case. And Tracy did start to get some attention. She was getting views. People were interested in learning more and they were asking questions, and she started to build a big following on there. In fact, right now she has more than 100,000 followers on TikTok. TikTok is even how I found out about this case, because one of you guys actually sent me one of Tracy's TikToks and informed me of her search for her mum.
Stop scrolling and take a second to look at this picture. This lady in the picture is my mom. Her name is Janice LaPlant. She also goes by the name of Becky. Most friends and family call her Becky. She was last seen leaving Lincoln Manor Apartments in Lincoln, Alabama in July 2011. She has been an active missing person since 2011. This is my mom, and she's been missing since 2011. Her name is Janice LaPlant. She went missing from Lincoln, Alabama. I wanted to take a minute to make a video to describe what my mom looked like in case someone may have seen her or someone knows anything about her missing persons case. Come on, kitty. So she has a left eye that is black, as you can see, and then she has a bluish greenish gray eye. The black eye, she suffered from head trauma. That's what happened. She had a kind of a crooked nose, you can tell a little bit. She's had her nose broken a bunch of different times. She has I mean, me and her look just like, honestly, but she's about 5'3" to 5'4", weighed between 90 and 110 pounds. She had all of her teeth except for one that was missing. Her hair was like a brownish reddish color. If y'all know anything, please let me know or call this number down below. Thank you.
Tracy received so much love and support from her followers. Of course, naturally, she has received some not so nice comments from people. That is the risk of putting yourself on social media. But overall, it has been so incredibly positive and has really started to give Janice's case the attention that it needs and deserves, finally. Tracy's followers started asking her what they could do to help. Where could they donate? Who can they call to get the investigation going again? And it does seem as though this attention on her mum's case that Tracy managed to obtain through TikTok is really what got the ball rolling again with the police investigation. Since her TikTok videos, law enforcement have informed Tracy that her mum's case is open. They are actively looking into it now, whereas before, the case kind of stood at a standstill for years. There was nothing going on with it. But this new social media interest in the case put pressure on the police to start properly looking into it. They have a new investigator going over the case now, and there have been some leads and lines of inquiry that they have so far followed up on, one being a Jane Doe lead. In November of 2016, the skeletal remains of a female were discovered behind the Best Value Inn on a road called Merchants Drive in Knoxville in Tennessee. Unfortunately, because her remains were skeletal, the authorities couldn't determine much about this woman's appearance as she had been deceased for a good while, but they believed that she was of European descent, that she was around 5'5" in height and aged around 35 to 50 when she died. From what I can gather, her cause of death has never been released to the public. Perhaps even the police do not know exactly how she died, and her name has never been released because they don't know her name. The police weren't able to identify her, and so she became known as the Knoxville Jane Doe. The East Valley, Tennessee crime Stoppers appealed to the public for information regarding her identity, and they released a facial reconstruction of what it's believed Jane Doe may have looked like when she was alive. And Tracy saw this facial reconstruction. She stumbled upon a YouTube video last year which was about the Knoxville Jane Doe, and as soon as she saw the facial reconstruction, she immediately thought that it bore a strong resemblance to Janice, and she wondered if perhaps it was her mum. So Tracy got in touch with the Knoxville County Regional Forensic Center, and she told them about her mum's case and that she had a strong feeling that her mum may have been the Knoxville Jane Doe. And so they looked into this further, and it took a while, but eventually Janice was ruled out as being the Knoxville Jane Doe. Swabs of Tracy's DNA were taken to be compared against Jane Doe's, and it was not a match. And as far as I'm aware, sadly, the Knoxville Jane Doe still remains unidentified as of May 2023. And this news did come as a shock for Tracy. She really did believe that this Jane Doe could have been her mum, and that finally, after so many years, she had found her. She had some answers as to what had happened to her. So to then receive the news that actually that wasn't the case, that the Knoxville Jane Doe was not a match, it must have felt so bittersweet for her, because on the one hand it means that there's still some hope that perhaps her mum is still alive and out there somewhere, but then on the other hand it means that she's just back to having no closure and no idea where her mum is. But despite this dead end and emotional setback, still Tracy refuses to give up. She's still more determined than ever to find out what happened to her mum all those years ago. She still posts regularly on her TikTok about her mum's case. She's still in constant contact with law enforcement whilst they continue their investigation. She's gone on a couple of true crime podcasts such as the Full Line and the Missing podcast to spread awareness, both of which I will link down below. I'll leave a link to the episodes that Tracy was on. She's doing everything she can to keep people talking about Janice's disappearance and prevent it from becoming a cold case once again. And she's doing all of this whilst also being a mum herself. Tracy is in her mid-30s now. She has 3 kids herself. So she is honestly like Superwoman, looking after her children whilst also continuing the search for her mum. Tracy says that her kids do ask about their grandmother Janice a lot, and Tracy hasn't told them much. She hasn't told them the whole situation surrounding her mum's disappearance or about the trauma that she went through as a child. She's just told her kids that their grandmother is lost, that they are trying to find her, and that she's still with them wherever she is. She'll always be with them. Earlier this year, with the help from Central Alabama Crime Stoppers and Season of Justice, a billboard with Janice's name and face on was put up near the area where she went missing, off Interstate 20 near the Talladega Superspeedway in Lincoln. And it's going to be up for about 6 months in the hopes that this will generate some new leads, but unfortunately so far there have been no new tips come in. As of recently, Tracy has submitted her mum's story to Dateline and Unsolved Mysteries in the hopes that they might be able to cover the case to get it out there even more, which is actually something we can all do to try and help too. I've sent an email to Dateline asking if they can cover Janice's case, and it would be so great if you guys could do that too. I will put Dateline's email address on the screen. Obviously, the more people email them, the more chance we have of them covering Janice's story. With cases like this, it's not enough to just listen to the story. We have to all be proactive true crime viewers. We have to get behind Tracy and help her spread the word on her mum's case, because the more eyes on this case, the more people hear about Janice's disappearance, the better chance the police have of solving it. Because sometimes it just takes one person, the right person, hearing about it and coming forward to detectives with information that could provide a breakthrough in the investigation. And there are so many ways that you can help Tracy with her search for answers. You can go and follow her on TikTok and watch and share her videos. You can share Janice's missing posters on your own social media platforms. You can share this video on your social media platforms. Share Janice's case with people you know, particularly if you live in the US, and especially if you live or you know people that live in Alabama Alabama, or that did live in Alabama at the time that Janice went missing. Again, if you are able to, you can donate to the GoFundMe page that Tracy has set up. The donations to the GoFundMe will be going towards funding the search for Janice. The money will go on things like new billboards and keeping the billboard that is in the area where Janice vanished up for longer. And if Tracy is faced with any funeral expenses in the future, if Janice is sadly not found alive, then the donations can go towards giving her a nice burial. And also, as well as all of that, just show your love and support to Tracy. Like I said earlier, I'm sure she'll probably be reading through the comments on this video, so if you want to leave a little kind message to her down below, then I'm sure she'll see it and be really grateful. Or head over to her TikTok and leave her a comment just letting her know that you're there and that she has your support. One thing that Tracy really wants to achieve through all of this work, apart from the obvious finding her mum, is to change the narrative in true crime that people like Janice don't deserve to be looked for. Tracy has received so many comments over the years from people saying things like, oh, your mum treated you so badly when you were a child, so why do you care that she is missing? Why are you trying to find her? And Tracy just responds to those comments by saying, because she's my mum. She wants to give her mum a voice, because if the same thing happened to her, if she disappeared, she would hope that someone would actively search for her. I think that's all any of us would hope for if, God forbid, we went missing without a trace. Tracy doesn't want people to hear Janice's story, hear that she struggled with mental health issues and drug addictions, and automatically put her into a box or a category and assume that because of her lifestyle, she doesn't deserve to be found. Because no one is perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect victim. We're all human. We all make mistakes. But the mistakes people have made in life should not determine whether or not they deserve justice if they are murdered, or whether or not they deserve to be looked for if they disappear. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Janice LaPlant, I urge you to please get in contact with the authorities. Some contact details will be on the screen and also linked down below in the description box. And that concludes this case. That is the unsolved case of Janice LaPlant. I really hope that Tracy can get some answers soon, because I truly do believe that this case can be solved. Someone out there must know something, so we just need to generate as much awareness and try to spread the word on this case as much as possible, which is so much easier to do nowadays with social media. So again, please share this video, share the missing posters, share Tracy's TikToks, engage with her TikToks, like and comment on them so that more attention is drawn to them, and hopefully one day soon Tracy will have some closure. But yeah, that is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, feel free to let me know in the comments of any other cases you would like to see me cover on this channel. Give the video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you again next week for another mystery with Molly. Bye!